Hello students, welcome back. We are going to be examining some documents today regarding the American Revolution, focusing in on a specific group of people, one that sometimes is overlooked within the struggle for independence. Those colonists that remained loyal to Great Britain, or commonly referred to as Loyalists. By 1775, the movement for independence had actually gained a fair amount of popularity and traction within the colonies. And the year after that, we of course have Thomas Paine's publishing of the pamphlet Common Sense, which again is proposing arguments in favor of independence. And this was a widely read document, and it was published in January of 1776. It sold as many as 120,000 copies in the first 3 months and 500,000 in the first year, and went through 25 different editions in the first year alone. Despite the popularity of Thomas Paine's Common Sense and the traction that the independence movement was gaining during the mid-1770s, still about 15 or 20%, it's almost up to 1 out of every 5 colonists, was actually in favor of remaining loyal and remaining part of Great Britain, loyal to King George III. The Loyalists tended to be wealthier people. They tended to be merchants or people active in the Anglican Church. There were also concentration of Loyalists in certain areas such as New York and Long Island. And this is really interesting as we look at different regions of the colonists. You wouldn't see really any Loyalists at all within Massachusetts, specifically Boston. And Boston is looked at as being the very beginning point of the American Revolution. So we do see some differences depending upon what region of the colonies you're examining. Some things that I would like you to be mindful of as we read through the documents, do some highlighting and some annotations. Number one, why did some colonists oppose independence? Do you think that the arguments that we encounter are reasonable? What might patriots, those who favored independence strongly, have said in response to their arguments? And which side do you think was more reasonable? We have 2 primary source documents. First, we'll look at our sourcing information. Document here is created by Charles Inglis. He's an Anglican minister, and we know from our conversation so far that the Anglicans tended to be loyalists. And he wrote a pamphlet in response to Thomas Paine's Common Sense. So this is an excerpt from his pamphlet in response to Common Sense. And this is entitled The True Interest of American Impartially Stated, 1776. And keep in mind, impartial means fair or objective. We're going to encounter a few vocabulary terms as we go through the reading. Calamity refers to disaster. Disinterested, not motivated by personal interest. Or torrents, meaning streams. The True Interest of America, impartially stated, 1776. Suppose we were to revolt from Great Britain, declare ourselves independent and set up a republic of our own. What would be the consequence? My blood runs chill when I think of the calamities, the complicated evils that must follow. So interesting opening. The author, Charles Inglis, is suggesting that even if the colonists were successful, that bad things would occur. My blood runs chill when I think of the calamities. So bad things will happen if they gain independence. As a consequence, setting up the republic. Devastation and ruin must mark the progress of this war along the sea coast of America. So far, Britain has not exerted her power. Her number of troops and ships of war here at present is very little more than she judged necessary in times of peace. Okay, interesting argument that pointing out the power of Great Britain, and Great Britain did have a very strong military at the time. So saying, look, Great Britain can bring about great military presence, great military power, exert this really powerful army. But as soon as we declare independence, ruthless war, with all its aggravated horrors, will ravage our once happy land. Our seacoasts and ports will be ruined and our ships taken. Torrents of blood will be spilled and thousands reduced to beggary and wretchedness. So as soon as we move forward to this plan of independence. So this is outlining this idea that the colonists cannot win the war. And this probably is a pretty thoughtful argument. Honestly, at the time, Great Britain has the most powerful army on earth. The colonists are kind of loosely organized. They're not fully united. They're not particularly well equipped in comparison. They're certainly not as well experienced as the soldiers that the British will be able to field. So he describes the war that's going to be ruthless, with aggravated horrors ravaged upon our happy land, right? So things are good right now, and things are going to be terrible during the war. Ports will be ruined, meaning it's going to be harder to get goods. Trade will cease to function. Their ships will be taken, again, affecting travel, affecting trade, and torrents of blood will be spilled. People are going to die. By declaring independence, we would instantly lose all assistance from our friends in England. They will stop saying anything in our favor, for they would be seen as rebels and treated accordingly. Okay, so they're making a case here that the colonies are still reliant on England. We have relationships with people back in England, and those relationships will cease to function should independence be declared. The only European power from which we can possibly receive assistance is France, but France is now at peace with Great Britain. And is it possible that France would interrupt that peace and risk another war with England from a disinterested motive of aiding and protecting these colonies? So pointing out that France is now at peace with England. Is France really going to want to help these colonies? This is a poignant question here. So we see pointing out here, if we think about these points, bad things will happen. Britain is powerful. Colonists will die. No allies. They're actually wrong about this one. France eventually will come in. It'll take a while though, but hard to argue against these other things. So it's interesting to think how people felt when they read this. There's probably a group that's in the middle. You probably have your two extremes, right? People who are very strongly wanting to remain loyal, people that are very strongly patriotic towards independence. And then you probably have a good chunk in the middle that might have really taken pause by these arguments. It's interesting to think. Let's take a look at document B. Take a look at our sourcing information. The letter above was published by an anonymous writer in a Pennsylvania newspaper. So the fact that the writer's anonymous is interesting. It wasn't terribly uncommon for things to be published in newspapers anonymously. Ben Franklin famously wrote under a pseudonym and published a great many things anonymously. So that's not terribly unique, but it is interesting. Perhaps the author, if they're a loyalist, is concerned about having their identity known, maybe being attacked if there's a lot of patriots in the area, being ostracized socially. So it's a real interesting thing that the writer's anonymous. It also, hinders our ability to really maybe fully appreciate the source, not knowing who the author is, not knowing his or her background and things of such. But there are some compelling reasons why a person, depending upon where they're at, and Pennsylvania was probably an area that really favored independence when you're comparing it to other areas like New York that had a substantial number of loyalists. Let's take a look at our document here. We're going to counter some vocabulary terms. Flourishing, meaning rapidly growing, rational, reasonable, inflammatory, referring to arousing violent feelings. Cordial is warm and friendly, and reconciliation existing in harmony. January 2nd, 1775, Pennsylvania Packet. My friends and countrymen, this howling wilderness has been converted into a flourishing and populous country. But is this not due to the way in which the colonies have been treated from the beginning? Isn't our growth a result of Great Britain's willingness to encourage our industry and protect us from foreign countries? If so, surely some degree of gratitude, such as becomes a free and liberal people, would be appropriate. Okay, so we see actually a different line of arguing here. The first document's really arguing that the colonists can't win, right? We're going to lose, it's going to be bloody, we are facing the strongest army, we have no allies. But here, this is not the main tone of the argument as we look at this opening paragraph, right? This one is much more suggesting going against Great Britain is not the right thing to do, and making an argument that, look, we carved out a civilization out of what was wilderness. And this civilization that we've created is flourishing. But saying that this is because of the support of Great Britain. Isn't our growth a result of Great Britain's willingness to encourage our industry and protect us from foreign countries? Could be a direct reference of the French and Indian War there. Such as becomes a free and liberal people would be appropriate, that they should be grateful, they should have gratitude for England. So it's interesting as we look at this. Right? Argues the colonies should be grateful. The peace and security we have already enjoyed under Great Britain's protection before the mistaken system of taxation took place must make us look back with regret to those happy days whose loss we mourn, and which every rational man must consider as the golden age of America. So the letter goes on, not too long ago, basically saying that it was a golden age, right? We had peace, we had security, we had a good system. Prior to, and it's interesting, the letter writer, even though they're loyalists, they do seem to be upset about the new form of taxes that were occurring within the colonies. So before the mistaken taxation took place. Security we have already enjoyed under Great Britain. So again, crediting England with these things that are going so well. Let us then, my friends and countrymen, be patient and avoid all inflammatory publications that are disrespectful to our most gracious sovereign. Let us look forward to a happy termination of our present disputes and a cordial reconciliation with our mother country. So a lot going on here in the closing. Be patient. Avoid inflammatory publication, right? Don't ratchet up the temperature. Use diplomacy. Be respectful to our gracious sovereign, to our ruling country. And a happy termination of the present disputes. Cordial reconciliation, right? All is not lost in this relationship. So as we look at this part, right, all is not lost. Friends in the future. All right, we'll come back together. All right, we have a last page here, which is a written response focusing on both documents A. So we have our sourcing information, complete sentences here. This is going to include who wrote the document, when it was created, what was the document, what was its purpose, anything of this nature here. Close reading, what are 2 reasons this author gives for why American colonists should be loyal to England? Provide a quote to support your answer. So you can go back to the document, you look for a quote, you put that in quotation marks. In addition to your written response. Contextualization, based on this document, what can you infer about what life was like in the colonies in the 1700s? So an inference, I'm making somewhat of a conclusion based on some information, even though maybe you're not 100% certain about it. Corroboration deals with compare and contrast. Based on these two letters, how did Loyalists feel about England's rule over the colonies? What would people who disagreed with them say? So compare and contrast, put the two documents together, kind of a final claim, also considering what others might have said about what these documents were stating. I can't wait to see your responses. Bye for now.